Hey guys, tonight we venture into a world where survival wasn't a weekend hobby, but a daily reckoning with forces that could kill you in your sleep. We're stepping into the boots of men who understood cold not as an inconvenience, but as a living adversary that demanded respect, cunning, and knowledge passed down through generations of hard-won experience. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Picture this. You're standing in a mountain valley where the temperature hasn't climbed above zero for 3 weeks straight. The air is so sharp, it feels like breathing glass, and every exhale creates a cloud that freezes before it can drift away. Your modern gear has failed. Your battery-powered devices are dead weights in your pack. Your synthetic insulation has compressed into useless lumps. Yet somewhere in this frozen wasteland, a man with nothing but wool, leather, and centuries-old wisdom is not only surviving, but thriving. This is the world of the mountain men, and they knew secrets about cold that we've forgotten in our rush toward technological solutions. The mountain men of the American frontier lived in a realm where understanding cold meant the difference between seeing another sunrise and becoming another cautionary tale whispered around distant campfires. These weren't weekend warriors with GPS devices and emergency beacons. They were men who disappeared into the wilderness for months at a time, armed with nothing but their knowledge, their tools, and a relationship with winter that bordered on the mystical. They didn't fight the cold, they danced with it. Modern survival experts will tell you about layering systems and moisture-wicking fabrics, but the mountain men understood something deeper. They knew that surviving cold wasn't just about staying warm. It was about reading the language of winter itself, understanding its moods, its patterns, its gifts, as well as its threats. They could feel a storm coming in their bones 3 days before it arrived. They could tell the difference between snow that would melt and snow that would kill. They could build shelters that were warmer inside than many modern homes, using nothing but what the forest provided. Consider Jim Bridger, who spent 40 years in the Rocky Mountains and claimed he never felt truly cold once he learned the mountain's ways. Or Hugh Glass, who crawled 200 miles through winter wilderness after being mauled by a grizzly, using techniques that would seem impossible to modern survivalists. These men weren't superhuman. They simply possessed knowledge that we've traded away for the convenience of central heating and synthetic materials. The first thing they understood was that cold isn't uniform. It has textures, personalities, and behaviors that change with altitude, humidity, and wind patterns. A mountain man could tell you that minus 20 degrees in dry air felt different from minus 20 in humid conditions. He knew that certain types of cold would seep through wool while others bounced off it. He understood that cold moved like water, flowing into low places, pooling in valleys, and creating invisible rivers of frigid air that could freeze exposed skin in minutes. They recognized that cold had allies. Wind was its cavalry, turning manageable temperatures into life-threatening conditions in seconds. Moisture was its spy, infiltrating clothing and shelter, conducting heat away from the body with ruthless efficiency. Altitude was its fortress, where every 1,000 feet of elevation meant the cold grew stronger, more aggressive, more patient in its assault on human warmth. But they also knew cold's enemy. The sun, even weak winter sun, was a powerful ally if you knew how to harness it. They would position their shelters to catch the first rays of dawn and the last light of dusk. They understood that certain rocks and tree formations held heat long after the sun disappeared. They knew which side of a mountain would be warmest at different times of day and different seasons. The mountain men developed an intimate relationship with fire that went far beyond simply lighting kindling. They understood fire as both tool and companion. They knew which woods burned hottest and longest, which created the least smoke, which could be lit even when soaked with snow. They could build fires that would burn all night without tending, fires that would heat rocks to keep them warm for hours, fires that would reflect heat in specific directions to maximize warmth while minimizing fuel consumption. They mastered the art of the reflector fire, building walls of stone or logs behind their flames to bounce heat back toward their bodies. They created fire beds, burning large fires down to coals, then covering them with dirt and sleeping on the heated ground. They understood that a small, well-positioned fire could be more effective than a large, wasteful blaze. They could start fires in conditions that would defeat modern fire-starting technology, using techniques that relied on understanding rather than equipment. These men knew that clothing wasn't just about insulation, but about creating microclimates around the body. They layered not just for warmth, but for adaptability. Their base layers were chosen for their ability to move moisture away from skin. Their middle layers trapped air and provided insulation. Their outer layers shed wind and precipitation while allowing excess heat and moisture to escape. But more importantly, they could adjust this system throughout the day as conditions changed. They understood that wool remained warm even when wet, but they also knew how to keep it dry. They knew that leather needed specific treatment to remain supple in extreme cold. They recognized that certain animal furs had properties that no synthetic material could replicate. A beaver pelt processed correctly could shed water while maintaining insulation. Bear fur could provide warmth that lasted through the coldest nights. Buffalo hide, properly prepared, could turn a side wind that would cut through modern materials. But perhaps most importantly, they understood that the human body itself was the most sophisticated cold weather system ever designed. They knew how to read the early signs of hypothermia and frostbite, not through medical training, but through intimate familiarity with their own physical responses to cold. They could feel circulation changes, recognize the subtle shift in mental clarity that signaled danger, and take corrective action before problems became life-threatening. They knew which foods provided the most efficient fuel for maintaining body heat. They understood that fat wasn't just sustenance, but medicine in extreme cold. They recognized that certain teas and broths could warm the body from within more effectively than alcohol, despite alcohol's reputation as a warming agent. They knew that timing meals correctly could mean the difference between comfortable warmth and dangerous heat loss. The mountain men developed shelter techniques that seem almost magical to modern eyes. They could build lean-tos that were warmer inside than outside, even when the mercury dropped to deadly levels. They understood how to use snow as insulation rather than seeing it as an enemy. They knew which natural formations provided the best protection from wind and where to position shelters to take advantage of thermal currents. They recognized that survival in extreme cold wasn't a battle to be won, but a negotiation to be maintained. Every decision, from where to step to what to eat to when to sleep, was part of an ongoing conversation with the cold. They listened to what winter was telling them and responded with knowledge passed down through generations of men who had learned these lessons the hard way. These weren't primitive people struggling against nature with crude tools. They were sophisticated practitioners of a science we've largely forgotten, a science that recognized cold as a fundamental force that demanded understanding rather than simple resistance. They knew that the mountain's cold could be an ally as well as an enemy, preserving food, providing clean water, and creating conditions that could be harnessed rather than merely endured. What we've lost in our modern world isn't just their techniques, though those are valuable. We've lost their mindset, their way of thinking about cold as something to be understood rather than overcome. We've traded their deep knowledge for shallow convenience, their hard-won wisdom for easy solutions that work until they don't. The mountain men understood that cold wasn't just temperature, it was information. Every degree below freezing told them something about what was coming, what was possible, what was dangerous. They could read cold like we read a newspaper, extracting details that meant the difference between life and death. When the mercury hit certain thresholds, they knew exactly how long exposed skin could survive. When it dropped further, they understood which activities were possible and which were suicide. They recognized the personality of different types of cold. Dry cold that cracked like glass and cut through clothing in sharp lines. Wet cold that crept and clung and worked its way into every fiber, every gap, every vulnerable spot. Wind cold that moved like a living thing, hunting for openings, exploiting weaknesses, turning manageable temperatures into deadly assaults. Still cold that settled like a heavy blanket, patient and persistent, waiting for you to make a mistake. But they also knew cold's gifts. They understood that certain temperatures preserved meat better than others, that specific conditions created ice formations that could be harvested and used. They knew when cold would kill bacteria and when it would simply slow decay. They recognized that frozen ground could be harder than concrete, but also that it could be worked if you knew the right techniques and timing. The mountain men developed an almost supernatural ability to predict weather changes through their understanding of cold's behavior. They could feel barometric pressure shifts in their joints and bones. They noticed how cold air moved differently before storms, how it carried different scents, how it interacted with smoke and steam in ways that telegraphed coming changes hours or even days in advance. They understood that cold moved in patterns flowing like invisible rivers through landscapes. They could map these thermal currents, knowing where cold air would pool at night, where it would flow during the day, where warm pockets might persist even in brutal conditions. They positioned their camps not just for convenience, but for thermal advantage, understanding that being 10 feet higher or 50 yards to the east could mean the difference between comfort and misery. Their relationship with wind was particularly sophisticated. They didn't just note wind direction and speed. They understood wind's relationship with cold, how it carried thermal information across vast distances, how it could strip heat from a body, or, if properly harnessed, how it could be used to maintain fires or ventilate shelters. They knew which winds brought warmth and which brought killing cold, often days before the temperature changes became obvious. The mountain men mastered the art of thermal layering in ways that went beyond clothing. They understood how to create thermal zones around their bodies using positioning, materials, and even breathing techniques. They knew how to trap warm air in specific places, how to channel body heat efficiently, how to create microclimates that extended their comfort zone far beyond what their clothing alone could provide. They developed techniques for sleeping in extreme cold that seem impossible to modern minds. They could sleep comfortably in temperatures that would kill an unprepared person, not through superhuman endurance, but through knowledge of how to manage heat loss during the vulnerable hours of sleep. They knew how to position their bodies to maximize warmth retention, how to use heated stones or coals safely through the night, how to arrange bedding to create the most efficient thermal envelope. Their understanding of nutrition in cold weather was remarkably sophisticated. They knew that the body's caloric needs increased dramatically in extreme cold, but more importantly, they understood which types of calories were most deficient. They recognized that fats provided sustained heat, while carbohydrates offered quick energy bursts. They knew which foods actually made you colder by requiring too much energy to digest, and which foods seemed to warm you from within through their chemical composition. The mountain men understood hydration in cold weather in ways that modern survival guides often miss. They knew that dehydration was as dangerous in winter as in summer, but they also understood that consuming too much cold liquid could drop core body temperature dangerously. They developed techniques for warming water efficiently, for melting snow without wasting precious fuel, for maintaining proper hydration without triggering hypothermia. They recognized that mental state played a crucial role in cold weather survival. They understood that fear, panic, and despair could kill as surely as freezing temperatures. They developed mental techniques for maintaining morale and focus during extended exposure to brutal conditions. They knew how to pace themselves psychologically, how to break impossible tasks into manageable segments, how to maintain hope when surrounded by hostile wilderness. Their knowledge extended to reading the landscape for thermal clues. They could identify areas where underground springs created warm spots, where rock formations would hold and reflect heat, where vegetation patterns indicated thermal advantages. They understood that south-facing slopes received more solar energy, But they also knew exceptions to this rule based on local geography and seasonal variations. The mountain men developed tools and techniques for working in extreme cold that seem almost magical. They knew how to keep metal tools from becoming dangerously cold, how to maintain dexterity in their hands when fine motor control meant the difference between success and failure. They understood which materials became brittle in cold and which actually performed better at low temperatures. They mastered the art of ice and snow as building materials. They could create structures from frozen water that were not only functional but comfortable, understanding how different types of snow and ice had different structural properties, different insulation values, different melting points. They could build with frozen materials as skillfully as carpenters worked with wood. Their understanding of time and cold weather was uniquely sophisticated. They knew that everything took longer in extreme cold, from simple tasks to complex projects. But they also understood how to work efficiently in cold conditions, how to time activities to take advantage of thermal windows, how to sequence tasks to minimize heat loss and maximize productivity. The mountain men understood that cold weather survival wasn't about enduring discomfort, but about achieving a sustainable balance with challenging conditions. They didn't suffer through cold weather. They learned to be comfortable in it, to find pleasure and satisfaction in mastering its demands, to see winter not as an enemy to be defeated, but as a challenging partner in an ongoing dance. They developed a deep appreciation for the beauty and power of cold environments, understanding that this appreciation wasn't just aesthetic, but practical. Men who hated winter died in it. Men who learned to find beauty and meaning in cold weather developed the mental resilience necessary for long-term survival in harsh conditions. Perhaps most remarkably, they understood that knowledge about cold was living, breathing information that needed to be constantly updated and refined. They never stopped learning, never assumed they had mastered winter completely. They remained students of cold throughout their lives, understanding that complacency in extreme environments was often fatal. The mountain men knew that surviving in cold wasn't about having the right gear. It was about having the right knowledge, the right mindset, and the right relationship with forces far more powerful than any individual human being. They understood that winter would always be dangerous, but it didn't have to be deadly if you approached it with proper respect, preparation, and understanding. Their mastery of cold went beyond survival. They achieved something modern outdoor enthusiasts rarely experience. They became comfortable in conditions that would send most people fleeing for heated shelters. This comfort wasn't resignation or numbness. It was genuine adaptation, a state where frigid temperatures became just another environmental factor to work with rather than against. They understood that the human body possessed remarkable adaptive capabilities that most people never discovered. Through gradual exposure and proper technique, they could train their circulatory systems to function efficiently in extreme cold. Their hands remained functional at temperatures that would incapacitate untrained fingers. Their core temperature regulation became so efficient that they could maintain warmth with minimal external heat sources. The mountain men recognized that cold had rhythms and cycles that extended far beyond daily temperature fluctuations. They could predict seasonal patterns, understanding how cold would behave differently in early winter versus deep freeze periods versus spring transitions. They knew that certain types of cold weather created opportunities while others demanded retreat and patience. They developed an almost mystical ability to sense dangerous cold before it became life-threatening. Long before hypothermia symptoms appeared in medical textbooks, they could recognize the subtle signs in themselves and others. They felt the way thinking became slightly sluggish, the way coordination began to deteriorate, the way decision-making started to suffer. These early warnings allowed them to take corrective action while they still possessed the clarity and dexterity to save themselves. Their understanding of group dynamics in cold weather was remarkably sophisticated. They knew that cold affected people differently, that some individuals became liabilities in extreme conditions while others became more capable. They understood how to organize groups for cold weather travel, how to position weaker members to take advantage of stronger members' body heat, how to rotate leadership as conditions demanded different skills. The mountain men mastered techniques for maintaining morale during extended cold weather experiences that modern psychology is only beginning to understand. They knew that laughter could literally warm the body, that storytelling could distract the mind from discomfort, that singing could regulate breathing and improve circulation. They developed rituals and traditions that helped groups maintain cohesion when individual survival instincts might otherwise fragment their cooperation. They understood that cold weather created unique opportunities that couldn't be found in warmer conditions. Frozen rivers became highways through otherwise impassable terrain. Snow provided camouflage and insulation materials. Ice could be harvested and stored for later use. Cold preserved meat and other perishables for extended periods without refrigeration technology. Their knowledge of animal behavior in cold weather was encyclopedic. They could predict where game would shelter, how animals' feeding patterns changed with temperature drops, which creatures remained active in extreme cold and which ones retreated. They understood that following animal trails in winter often led to thermal advantages, as animals naturally sought the warmest routes through cold landscapes. The mountain men developed techniques for maintaining equipment in extreme cold that seem almost alchemical. They knew which oils and greases remained liquid at sub-zero temperatures, how to prevent metal from conducting dangerous amounts of cold to exposed skin, how to keep leather supple when most materials became brittle and useless. They mastered the art of cold weather hunting and food procurement in ways that went far beyond simple marksmanship. They understood how cold affected projectile trajectories, how snow and ice changed the acoustic properties of gunshots, how extreme temperatures affected the performance of black powder weapons. They could track animals through snow conditions that would baffle modern hunters, reading stories in disturbed snow that revealed not just where animals had passed, but when, how fast they were moving, and what their condition was. Their food preservation techniques using cold were remarkably advanced. They understood natural refrigeration in ways that allowed them to maintain fresh meat for weeks or months without spoilage. They knew how to use freeze-thaw cycles to improve the texture and flavor of certain foods, how to create natural cold storage that maintained consistent temperatures, how to protect stored food from scavengers while keeping it accessible during harsh weather. The mountain men understood that cold weather required different approaches to personal hygiene and health maintenance. They knew which practices were essential for preventing cold-related illnesses and which normal hygiene routines could actually be dangerous in extreme conditions. They developed techniques for staying clean without exposing themselves to dangerous heat loss, understanding that cleanliness wasn't just comfort, but crucial for maintaining the insulation properties of their clothing and bedding. They recognized that navigation in cold weather presented unique challenges and opportunities. Snow could obscure familiar landmarks while simultaneously creating new ones. Cold weather often brought clearer air that extended visibility, but it also created optical illusions and thermal mirages that could mislead inexperienced travelers. They learned to read the subtle signs that remained constant regardless of snow cover, understanding how terrain features influenced wind patterns and thermal currents in ways that could guide them even in whiteout conditions. Their understanding of cold weather medicine was practical and effective. They knew which plants remained potent in frozen conditions, how to prepare herbal remedies that worked specifically for cold-related ailments, how to treat frostbite and hypothermia using techniques that often surpassed the effectiveness of modern first aid approaches. They understood that certain injuries were more dangerous in cold weather, while others were actually less problematic. The mountain men developed psychological techniques for dealing with the isolation and sensory deprivation that often accompanied extended cold weather experiences. They understood that long winter nights and monochromatic landscapes could affect mental health in predictable ways. They created mental exercises, meditation practices, and visualization techniques that helped maintain psychological stability during months of challenging conditions. They mastered the art of cold weather communication, understanding how extreme temperatures affected sound transmission, how wind and snow changed the acoustic properties of their environment. They developed signaling techniques that worked in conditions where normal methods failed, creating systems for maintaining contact across distances when visibility was limited and sound was distorted. Their knowledge of cold weather construction was remarkably advanced. They could build structures that remained comfortable even when outside temperatures dropped to lethal levels, using principles of thermodynamics that modern engineers are rediscovering. They understood how to create thermal breaks, how to design ventilation systems that maintained air quality without losing heat, how to use thermal mass to store and release heat efficiently. The mountain men understood that different types of snow had vastly different properties and uses. They could identify dozens of snow conditions, each with specific characteristics that affected everything from travel to construction to insulation. They knew which snow would compact into solid building material, which would provide the best insulation, which was dangerous to travel on, and which indicated specific weather patterns. They developed techniques for creating and maintaining light sources in extreme cold that went far beyond simple fire building. They understood how cold affected the burning properties of different materials, how to create long-lasting illumination using minimal fuel, how to position light sources to maximize both illumination and heat output. They could create lighting systems that functioned reliably, even in conditions that would extinguish most flames. Their understanding of cold weather clothing maintenance was crucial to their survival. They knew how to repair and modify garments in the field using available materials, how to waterproof items that had lost their protective properties, how to adapt clothing for changing conditions. They understood that clothing was not just personal protection, but essential survival equipment that required constant attention and care. The mountain men mastered techniques for sleeping in extreme cold that allowed them to remain comfortable and well-rested, even in brutal conditions. They understood how body position affected heat retention, how breathing techniques could maintain warmth, how to create sleeping systems that functioned safely through the night without constant tending. They could sleep soundly in temperatures that would keep modern campers awake and miserable. They developed water procurement and management techniques that ensured adequate hydration, even when natural water sources were frozen solid. They knew how to locate water in frozen landscapes, how to melt snow and ice efficiently, how to prevent water containers from freezing, how to recognize and avoid contaminated water sources even when they appeared clean and pure. Their understanding of cold weather travel was comprehensive and practical. They knew how to move efficiently through snow of different depths and consistencies, how to navigate safely on frozen water, how to recognize and avoid avalanche-prone areas. They understood how cold affected their own physical capabilities and adjusted their travel plans accordingly, knowing when to push forward and when conditions demanded patience and shelter. The mountain men recognized that cold weather created unique social dynamics that required specific leadership and cooperation skills. They understood how extreme conditions could reveal character traits that remained hidden in comfortable circumstances, how to identify individuals who could be trusted in life-threatening situations, how to organize groups for maximum efficiency and mutual support. They mastered the art of cold weather tool making and modification, creating implements specifically designed for frigid conditions. They understood which materials performed well in extreme cold, how to modify existing tools for winter use, how to create specialized equipment using only materials available in wilderness settings. Their innovations often surpassed the functionality of modern cold weather gear. Perhaps most importantly, they understood that mastering cold weather survival was a lifelong pursuit that required constant learning and adaptation. They never assumed their knowledge was complete, never stopped observing and experimenting, never became complacent about the dangers that extreme cold presented. This humility and continuous learning kept them alive when overconfidence would have been fatal. The mountain men achieved something that modern technology has made us forget was possible. They became genuinely comfortable in environments that we consider hostile and life-threatening. They didn't just survive winter, they thrived in it, finding beauty, opportunity, and deep satisfaction in mastering one of nature's most challenging conditions. Their legacy isn't just a collection of techniques and survival tips. It's a completely different way of thinking about our relationship with natural forces, a mindset that sees challenge as opportunity, hardship as teacher, and extreme conditions as chances to discover capabilities we never knew we possessed. They understood that knowledge without practice was worthless, but practice without understanding was deadly. The mountain men didn't just memorize techniques, they internalized principles, developing an intuitive grasp of how cold behaved that allowed them to adapt their methods to situations they'd never encountered before. When faced with unprecedented conditions, they could extrapolate from their understanding rather than simply following memorized procedures. Their mastery extended to reading the microclimates that existed within larger weather patterns. They could identify pockets of relative warmth in otherwise brutal environments, understanding how terrain features created thermal refuges that might be only degrees warmer, but could mean the difference between survival and death. They knew that a depression in the ground might trap cold air while a slight rise could provide relief. That certain tree formations created windbreaks that extended far beyond their visible boundaries. The mountain men developed an almost supernatural awareness of their own bodies' responses to cold stress. They could feel the subtle changes in circulation that preceded frostbite, recognize the mental fog that signaled the early stages of hypothermia, and sense when their core temperature was beginning to drop before any external symptoms appeared. This internal monitoring system was more sensitive and reliable than any thermometer. They understood that cold was not a constant enemy, but a force with moods and intentions that could be read and anticipated. They could distinguish between the sharp, aggressive cold that demanded immediate shelter and the patient, persistent cold that could be negotiated with through proper technique and positioning. They knew when cold was testing them and when it was preparing to kill them, responding appropriately to each situation. Their relationship with pain in cold conditions was particularly sophisticated. They understood that not all cold-related discomfort was dangerous, learning to distinguish between the pain that warned of injury and the pain that simply accompanied adaptation. They could endure significant discomfort when necessary while remaining alert to the warning signs that demanded immediate action. The mountain men mastered techniques for maintaining dexterity in extreme cold that seem impossible to modern hands. They could perform delicate tasks with fingers that should have been too numb to function, understanding how to maintain blood flow through movement patterns and positioning that kept their hands operational even in brutal conditions. They developed muscle memory for essential tasks that allowed them to work effectively even when cold had dulled their sense of touch. They recognized that cold weather created opportunities for stealth and concealment that didn't exist in warmer conditions. Snow muffled sound, white landscapes provided natural camouflage, and extreme cold often drove both animals and humans into predictable shelter patterns. They could move through winter landscapes with the ghost-like invisibility that made them nearly undetectable to both prey and enemies. Their understanding of cold weather psychology extended to recognizing how extreme conditions affected decision-making and risk assessment. They knew that cold could create a false sense of urgency that led to dangerous mistakes, but they also understood how it could sharpen focus and eliminate distractions. They learned to use cold psychological effects to their advantage while avoiding its mental traps. The mountain men developed techniques for creating warmth through movement that went far beyond simple exercise. They understood which types of motion generated the most heat with the least energy expenditure, how to move in ways that improve circulation without causing dangerous sweating, how to use isometric exercises to maintain warmth without visible activity that might alert enemies or prey. They mastered the art of thermal camouflage, understanding how their body heat created visible signatures in cold environments and learning to mask or redirect these thermal emissions. They could move through winter landscapes without creating the steam clouds, warm footprints, or heat signatures that would reveal their presence to observant trackers. Their knowledge of cold weather first aid was both practical and innovative. They understood how to treat injuries that occurred in extreme cold, recognizing that standard treatment methods often failed or became dangerous when temperatures dropped below certain thresholds. They developed field techniques for dealing with cold-specific medical emergencies that often proved more effective than conventional approaches. The mountain men understood that extreme cold created unique acoustic environments that could be exploited for both communication and detection. They knew how sound traveled differently through frigid air, how ice and snow affected echo patterns, how wind and temperature gradients created acoustic shadows and amplification zones. They could use these properties to communicate over long distances or to detect approaching threats. They developed sophisticated techniques for energy conservation in cold weather that extended far beyond simple calorie management. They understood how to minimize heat loss through breathing patterns, posture, and movement efficiency. They could maintain their energy reserves through careful pacing and strategic rest periods that maximized recovery while minimizing exposure. Their mastery of cold weather campsites went beyond simple shelter construction. They understood how to create thermal environments that were not just survivable, but actually comfortable, using principles of heat reflection, air circulation, and thermal mass that turned harsh wilderness into livable space. They could transform the most forbidding locations into temporary homes that provided genuine relief from brutal conditions. The mountain men recognized that extreme cold often brought exceptional clarity of thought and perception. They learned to harness this cold-induced mental acuity, using it to make crucial decisions, solve complex problems, and maintain situational awareness that might be dulled in more comfortable conditions. They understood that cold could be an ally to clear thinking if approached with the right mindset. They developed techniques for maintaining hope and morale during extended periods of extreme hardship that drew on deep psychological understanding. They knew how to break overwhelming challenges into manageable segments, how to find meaning and purpose in suffering, how to maintain faith in eventual success, even when current conditions seemed hopeless. Their understanding of group dynamics in extreme cold was remarkably nuanced. They could predict how different personality types would respond to cold stress, how to organize teams for maximum efficiency and mutual support, how to maintain group cohesion when individual survival instincts threatened to fragment cooperative efforts. They understood that extreme conditions revealed true character and planned accordingly. The mountain men mastered the art of improvisation in cold weather, understanding that rigid adherence to predetermined plans often proved fatal when conditions changed rapidly. They developed mental flexibility that allowed them to adapt their methods instantly when faced with unexpected challenges, drawing on their deep understanding of principles rather than relying on memorized procedures. They understood that cold weather created unique opportunities for learning and self-discovery that couldn't be found in comfortable conditions. They embraced these challenging experiences as chances to develop capabilities they never knew they possessed, to test their limits, and to grow in ways that only extreme adversity could provide. Their relationship with risk in cold weather was carefully calibrated and constantly adjusted. They understood how to take calculated risks when opportunities presented themselves while avoiding unnecessary dangers that could prove fatal. They could distinguish between acceptable risk that advanced their goals and foolish risk that served no useful purpose. The mountain men developed an almost mystical connection to winter landscapes that allowed them to find beauty and meaning in conditions that most people found only threatening and hostile. This aesthetic appreciation wasn't mere romantic sentiment, but a practical tool that helped them maintain the positive mental state necessary for long-term survival in challenging conditions. They understood that mastering cold weather survival required not just physical techniques, but a complete transformation of mindset and identity. They didn't just learn to survive winter, they became winter people, individuals whose very nature was adapted to thrive in conditions that would defeat those who remained fundamentally oriented toward warmth and comfort. Their legacy represents more than just a collection of survival techniques. It embodies a completely different way of relating to natural forces, a mindset that sees challenge as opportunity, hardship as teacher, and extreme conditions as chances to discover capabilities that comfortable living never reveals. They proved that human beings could not just endure the harshest conditions, but actually flourish in them, finding deep satisfaction and genuine comfort in mastering nature's most demanding challenges. The mountain men understood something that our modern world has largely forgotten, that true security comes not from insulating ourselves from natural forces, but from learning to work with them skillfully. They achieved a level of adaptation and competence in extreme conditions that seems almost magical to contemporary minds. But their abilities were built on knowledge, practice, and a relationship with the natural world that recognized both its dangers and its gifts. Their approach to cold weather mastery was holistic, integrating physical techniques with mental preparation, individual skills with group cooperation, immediate survival needs with long-term adaptation strategies. They understood that surviving extreme cold required not just the right techniques, but the right attitude, not just physical preparation, but mental and emotional readiness for challenges that would test every aspect of human capability. What they achieved represents one of humanity's greatest adaptations to hostile environments, a mastery of extreme conditions that allowed them to not just survive, but to find genuine fulfillment and meaning in some of the harshest places on Earth. Their knowledge remains relevant today, not just for outdoor enthusiasts and survivalists, but for anyone seeking to understand what human beings are truly capable of when they commit themselves fully to mastering the forces that shape our world. The mountain men didn't just survive winter, they became winter itself, understanding that true mastery comes not from fighting nature, but from learning its deepest rhythms. Their knowledge lives on in the whisper of wind through pine, in the crack of ice underfoot, in the patience required to read what the cold is telling us. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep in your heated home, remember that somewhere in your bones lies the same wisdom they carried. The cold is still out there, waiting to teach those brave enough to listen.